China is refusing to negotiate with President Trump on U.S. tariffs. In fact, the nation is taking the trade war to a new height. China is refusing to accept deliveries of Boeing jets. NBC's Janice Mackey-Frayer reports the move would not just be to blow to America's largest exporter, but also to the U.S. economy.
Imagine waking up one morning to find the global economy shaken by a single tweet. Tariffs slapped overnight, allies outraged, trade wars looming. What happens when the world's largest economy suddenly goes protectionist? Today, we're diving deep into how world leaders reacted to President Donald Trump's controversial tariffs, from fiery speeches to quiet backroom diplomacy, and how those reactions shaped the future of global trade. This is the story of a global economic domino effect and the leaders who pushed back. The tariff timeline. In early 2018, President Donald Trump imposed sweeping tariffs on imported steel and aluminum. 25% on steel, 10% on aluminum. The rationale? National security and reviving American manufacturing. Soon after, tariffs hit billions worth of Chinese goods, and China responded in kind. Trump's administration justified this under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, a seldom-used clause that allows tariffs on grounds of national defense. This kicked off what would become known as the trade war era. China, the primary target. Xi Jinping's China was the main target, and Beijing was not about to take it quietly. China responded with tit-for-tat tariffs, targeting key U.S. exports like soybeans, pork, and cars, striking directly at Trump's base in rural America. Xi Jinping gave speeches denouncing unilateralism and promoting globalization. The Chinese government accused the U.S. of starting the largest trade war in economic history. Behind the scenes, China ramped up its global trade alliances, especially through its Belt and Road Initiative, sending a clear message. It wasn't backing down. Economists warned of a chilling effect on global markets, and Chinese tech stocks took an early hit. But China dug in for the long haul. European Union, allies turned opponents. The European Union, long a U.S. ally, was stunned. Jean-Claude Juncker, president of the European Commission, called the move protectionism, pure and simple. The EU responded swiftly with counter tariffs on quintessential American goods like Harley-Davidsons, bourbon, and Levi's jeans. EU leaders were especially irked by being labeled a national security threat. Angela Merkel of Germany stressed the importance of multilateralism and warned against dismantling the post-WTO international order. In a dramatic move, Juncker flew to Washington to de-escalate tensions, a moment that led to a temporary truce, though deep mistrust lingered. Canada. The friendly fire. One of the most dramatic reactions came from Canada. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was offended by the national security justification. He famously called it insulting during a G7 press conference. Canada struck back with retaliatory tariffs on U.S. steel, aluminum, and even items like ketchup and lawnmowers. Trudeau, usually diplomatic, got firm. "We will not be pushed around," he declared. The tensions boiled over at the G7 summit in Quebec, where Trump left early and refused to sign the final communique, later calling Trudeau dishonest and weak on Twitter. This marked one of the lowest points in U.S.-Canada relations in recent history. Mexico, treading carefully. Mexico, already caught in a renegotiation of NAFTA, walked a diplomatic tightrope. President Enrique Peña Nieto initially avoided escalation, but eventually imposed retaliatory tariffs on American pork, cheese, and steel. The new Mexican president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, AMLO, prioritized economic stability. While critical, he maintained an open channel with Washington, focusing instead on securing the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, which replaced NAFTA. Mexico's approach: retaliate where necessary, but prioritize long-term stability. Japan and South Korea, strategic patience. Both Japan and South Korea were caught in a dilemma: react harshly or maintain strategic ties with Washington. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who had cultivated a close relationship with Trump, expressed regret but avoided direct confrontation. Japan sought exemptions and continued trade negotiations quietly, eventually securing partial deals. South Korea took a more conciliatory approach. It renegotiated its chorus trade agreement with the U.S., making minor concessions to avoid harsher measures. President Moon Jae-in prioritized North Korea diplomacy and didn't want to upset Trump unnecessarily. Both countries played the long game, managing the fallout with calculated restraint. India, asserting sovereignty. India, under Prime Minister Narendra Modi, saw the tariffs as a threat to its growing economic ambitions. India initially tried to negotiate, but after talks failed, imposed its own retaliatory tariffs on American almonds, apples, and lentils, key exports from U.S. swing states. Modi made no public condemnation, but emphasized India's right to protect its own markets. He also expanded trade ties with other partners, including the EU and Southeast Asia. Trump's tariffs strained what had been warming U.S.-India relations, turning trade into a key sticking point. Russia, an unexpected cheerleader. Interestingly, Russia saw an opportunity. While not directly affected by the tariffs, the Kremlin used the chaos to highlight American unpredictability. Vladimir Putin criticized U.S. protectionism, framing Russia as a victim of similar sanctions. Russian officials painted Trump's moves as validation of their own state-led economic model. In global forums, they sided with China and the EU in opposing U.S. measures. Russia, sidelined in much global trade, welcomed the fragmentation of Western economic unity. Brazil and Latin America, mixed bag. Brazil, a major steel exporter to the U.S., narrowly avoided heavy tariffs through last-minute exemptions and quotas. President Michel Temer engaged in intense lobbying to protect Brazil's industries. When Jair Bolsonaro came to power, his admiration for Trump complicated Brazil's stance, choosing alignment over confrontation. Elsewhere in Latin America, countries like Argentina and Colombia were largely spectators, some quietly repositioned to benefit from shifting supply chains. The global economic response. International institutions also weighed in. The World Trade Organization, WTO, received complaints from multiple countries, arguing that Trump's tariffs violated trade rules. The WTO's role was undermined as the U.S. blocked judge appointments, paralyzing its dispute resolution system. Christine Lagarde, then head of the IMF, warned of self-inflicted wounds and slowing global growth. The World Bank echoed these concerns, predicting a decline in global investment and trade. Global business leaders, from automakers to tech giants, warned of price hikes, supply chain chaos, and lower profits. Trump's tariffs weren't just about trade. They were about power, identity, and redefining America's place in the world. The reactions from world leaders tell a story of a global order under stress and the fragile balance between cooperation and conflict.